Greetings, loves. It is I, Tactical Girlfriend. Welcome back to the channel. I hope everybody's doing well. I've been shooting handguns for many years, and only recently have I felt like I've gotten my technique down on lock. There's been a lot of bad habits I picked up, a lot of things that simply were taught to me that just are outdated and just not really nuanced. So I just want to review what I wish I'd learned sooner. Now, whether you're a new shooter or a shooter who is very experienced, these lessons may apply to you. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the first lesson that I want to relay to you is support side grip. Your support hand should be doing most of the work in terms of grip to manage overall control of the gun, as well as manage the recoil. But there's been a lot of weird figures and sayings out there that you should be using 70% or 60% of your support side grip for the total grip strength used in handling your gun. And honestly, I find those numbers to be completely arbitrary, and it doesn't really illustrate what you should actually be doing. Now, personally, for me, in my experience, I should be using as much support hand side grip as humanly possible, honestly. There's no reason to not put more grip if I can put it on that gun. The support side grip controls that recoil so incredibly well, and it should be doing almost all of the work, really. Your trigger hand should be remaining nice and free and loose, and you should not be straining your hand while you're pulling that trigger. You should be letting this thing do all the work and let this hand be just pulling the trigger. In this case, really, you should be using pretty much as much grip strength as humanly possible, short of making the gun shake because you're straining your muscles. Obviously, that's going to defeat the entire purpose here. You don't want an unsteady hand, but you definitely do want to go short of that, just short of that, and make sure that you're giving it as much as you can to maintain a stable sight picture. Another thing I've learned about support side grip is that this hand is not only just giving me almost all of the grip strength that I'm giving this gun, but it's also allowing me to aim. I want to intentionally just dedicate all of the aiming activity with this hand. This hand moves the gun, this hand moves the trigger. It's really simple. Bring the gun up to your eyes with your left hand or your non-dominant hand, and aim with your non-dominant hand. Then once you're on target, just focus on this hand. Think about pulling that trigger. Don't worry, this hand is taking care of the rest. Don't cross your wires, don't confuse your body. It makes for a much faster and cleaner sight picture, and it really generally just helps with your overall movement of the gun. Another thing I wish I'd learned is what to do with my dominant hand. Now, obviously we've just determined that the non-dominant hand should be doing most of the grip work as well as the aiming and movement of the gun. But your dominant hand is obviously there to pull the trigger for one with your index finger, but what do you do with the rest of these fingers? Well, they are gripping the gun. Whether you like it or not, you're going to exert some level of strength through this hand on the gun, even if your non-dominant hand is doing most of the work. So, what exactly do we do with those fingers? Now, what's important to understand here is sympathetic motion, and in this case, as I pull this trigger with my index finger, the ring finger and the middle finger will tend to move with it. I don't really like that because that creates a variable grip, and that's not going to give you consistent results. If you are pulling that trigger with a pretty strong grip with all fingers on it, you might have a tendency for your sights to dip down and your overall gun to start to shoot low, and that's not going to really do you much good. Instead, what you want to do is imagine holding this gun one-handed in your dominant hand like a vise with your pinky as well as your index finger, because your pinky tends to not have any sympathetic motion with that, as opposed to your middle finger and your ring finger, which do. So, what we want to do is instead focus our grip strength on that pinky alone, as well as the index finger on the trigger. Leave your ring finger and your index really nice and loose so you can exaggerate this and not even grip the gun at all. Try shooting it one-handed like that, and you'll notice that you should have a pretty steady sight picture all the way through that trigger pull. Now, you obviously don't want to be shooting the gun with no grip on it with those fingers at all, because for one, shooting two-handed won't let you do that, but secondly, you're obviously not going to be wanting to have less grip on the gun. You do want some surface to be gripped. You just don't want to be pushing down with those two fingers that are problematic. So, try to keep those fingers nice and loose and focus on using your pinky as a strong finger in your grip. It'll do you a lot of favors. One other thing I really wish that I'd learned sooner is where to put my trigger finger on the trigger. A lot of people say to position the trigger somewhere in the middle of your pad on your first digit, That is very old advice. It's been said for decades now, and I don't really get it. I don't understand it. There is no way that you can possibly prescribe to every single shooter with their different size hands, their different size guns, and their different style grips a certain place for everyone to put their finger. It's simply complete nonsense. Now, what I'm saying is not to just do this a different way. I'm saying that you should try it yourself and see what works for you, because no one else can tell you that. Now, what I do personally is I actually put almost as much index finger as I possibly can fit through that trigger guard. The idea here is that you want to squeeze that trigger back. You're not trying to just gently pull it with a very tip of your finger in a weird, awkward way that causes this to wobble. For me, squeezing that trigger works really well. It gives me a very consistent sight picture as I pull that trigger, and I get very tight groups. So much so that this way, with the very tip of my finger, is wildly inaccurate in comparison. Now, that could be a training issue, that could be a technique issue, that could be just a thing that is subjective to me, but realizing this, I realize that this is also true for everybody else, and everyone should try different things. They should try different positions over that trigger and see what groups look best to them. There is no way that you can prescribe any certain position universally here because it is so incredibly subjective, and there are at least 3 different variables in play that you cannot possibly advise on universally. So, keep that in mind. Play around with it, understand that you are trying to squeeze the trigger and you're just trying to get a really nice even trigger pull and really tight groups. That's all there is to it, so get out there and try it out. And that wraps up everything I wish I had learned about shooting handguns a lot sooner. So I hope that this was informative to a lot of you out there. Some of you might be brand new to this, and I hopefully have instilled some wisdom that you may not have otherwise gotten. And if you are experienced, hopefully this gets you to just think about these things, and maybe you'll still have an epiphany, who knows. But if you did find this video enjoyable or useful, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell too. If you also got your own tips and tricks, I'd love to hear them in the comments below, so feel free to chime in. I also want to sincerely thank everyone who's keeping this channel alive on Patreon. This is not a cheap endeavor. I spend a lot of money on equipment and gear and guns to show you, ammo to try things out with, and range trips to try things at. So this has been a huge project, and it's got a lot of weight behind it from viewers like you. If you do want to go help chip in, you can always go to patreon.com/tacticalgf. The biggest contributors are named at the end of the video. Happy shooting! That's all I got for you today. I really appreciate you all tuning in. Please be good to each other out there, and as always, please take care. Bye!